Hello, Stratters. Nick, known as the Exalted One on Magic the Gathering Online, back this week with some more Modern action. So last we played Modern together, I played Abzan midrange, and as there typically is when you play a green-black deck and take a strong stance on it, there were some hurt feelings. So I made it pretty clear that I liked Abzan a lot, but some of you are Jund fans, so this week I'm going to be trying to appease those Jund fans and playing Jund midrange in Modern. Of note, I went through a little bit of an evolution as I made this video set. So the first couple videos were made with this deck list. Kind of the main thing here is that we're featuring Huntmaster of the Fells in the main deck as our 4-drop of choice. There's a lot of options that you can play in this spot. You can play Huntmaster, Kalidas, Olivia Voldaren, Pia and Kiran Nalar, the newest Chandra from Kaladesh block. There's a lot of different options, and I went with Huntmaster of the Fells. And as you'll see when I go over to the other deck list, Huntmaster is not as good in Jund as you might hope it to be. If you remember back to that Temur mid-range deck list that I played a few weeks ago, Huntmaster is pretty good in that deck because you could flip it by doing nothing on your turn, but you weren't wasting your mana because you had a lot of instants in the deck. So you could draw your card, pass the turn, flip the Huntmaster, and then on the opponent's turn cast Mana Leaks and Cryptic Commands and Snapcaster Lightning Bolts and a lot of different things like that. This deck, it's not quite the same. You can play a Huntmaster. If it lives to your turn, you untap. If you draw a Maelstrom Pulse or a Lilianna the Veil or some other sorcery speed card that you want to cast, there's a tension between casting that card and trying to flip your Huntmaster. So it's, I think, a little bit worse in this deck, and I end up cutting it later in the video set. So that's kind of how I feel about Huntmaster currently. Sort of the other major change with this deck list, so these are all cards that stay the same. I'm playing a couple Crumble to Dust and a couple Ghost Quarters in my sideboard to help out against the Tron matchup. And I have to say, I think it's not really worthwhile. I'm committing 4 sideboard slots to make a very, very poor matchup game 1 into a pretty poor matchup, I think, for the sideboard games, and I just don't think that that's really worthwhile. Other cards you can play in this slot would be Fulminator Mage. I think that's maybe a little bit better because that has more. Fulminator Mage is a better card against a lot of random decks. If you're just trying to fill out your numbers against decks, you can bring in a Fulminator Mage and not feel too bad about it. These are very specific for, I guess, Tron matchups. And because of that narrowness, they really have to pull their weight, and I find that sometimes it's difficult, especially against Eldrazi Tron. So against traditional Tron decks, if you're able to kind of get the game to go to turn 4, which is in itself somewhat risky against a Tron deck, they can have Tron turn 3, play a Karn, blow up one of your lands, and then you're never going to cast a Crumble to Dust. Against the Eldrazi Tron decks, I also find it's not particularly good, because let's say you get to turn 4, you Crumble to Dust, I don't know, an Urza's Land. If they still have Eldrazi Temple in the deck, they still have some broken mana and can cast these large things. So I find Crumble to Dust isn't as good as you would hope it to be. So the evolution of this deck, and this was kind of triggered by I got another Lilianna of the Veil, so I can finally play the full 4 in my green-black decks, adjusting things for that. So kind of key changes here. So this was a Huntmaster, and then this Tireless Tracker was a Huntmaster. Tireless Tracker has really impressed me in these, basically any deck that can play it. It's just such a great card drawing machine. Gets a little bit bigger as you do that, and so I really like it. So this is kind of taking the 4-drop slot in this deck, but it's nice because the card actually costs 3. And I say 4-drop because very often you'll cast it on turn 4, play your land drop, and get the clue immediately. So it's in that sense like a 4-drop, but you can play it on turn 3 if you want to. And it's also nice that your kind of pseudo 4-drop is a 3-drop, so you only lose 3 life instead of 4 when you flip it to Dark Confidant. Other changes to the main deck, just a small change to the mana base. I was playing some Blooming Marsh in the deck, but I've cut those because I wanted to play plenty of fetches to go with my Tireless Tracker, and then accordingly I want to have enough fetchable lands with the fetch lands to make the Tireless Tracker good. Uh, Looking at some deck lists online, I see a lot of people that play, a lot of fetch lands for their Tireless Tracker, 10 fetch lands because they want it to be good, but then they only have maybe, 5 or 6 fetchable lands, and it's very possible to run out. If you want your fetch lands to actually combo with your Tireless Tracker and draw you 2 cards instead of 1 card like a normal land, you have to have enough fetches, but you also have to have enough fetchable lands that you don't run out. So that was kind of one of the keys here, was cutting one of these quick lands to make room for that. Then change to the sideboard. Like I said, I think Tron is just so difficult to win that I'm not really going to bother with any slots for it, and instead try to focus on the matchups that are, actual 50-50 matchups, and try to, push those over the edge rather than take a really difficult matchup like Tron and try to win. So just kind of going over the things that we do have here. Pile of Kitchen Finks, good against burn decks, aggressive, zoo-type decks, but also just a fine mid-range grindy card, just a 2-for-1, gets you some life. It's a good card, I think, for the sideboard here. Grafdigger's Cage, primarily for collected company decks, but other decks that use their graveyard, like Storm, can bring it in against. Dredge, Leyline of the Void, also for Dredge. But I bring this in against decks like Grixis Death Shadow 2. That's a deck that's full of Delve threats, Snapcaster Mages, and Kolaghan's commands. Plus they're Grixis colors, so if you have this in the opening hand, there isn't really anything that they can do to interact with it, and it really hampers the way that their deck works. Collective Brutality, good against burn, but just a nice versatile answer card. Can round out your numbers of discard against combo decks, and has a lot of flexibility. Ancient Grudge primarily for affinity, but can be brought in against any sort of artifacts. Engineered Explosives, just a nice sweeper effect, similar with Damnation. Bring these in against collected company decks, and things like Elves, Counters Company. Engineered Explosives, also a nice answer to a Death Shadow. And then finally, other creatures that really help out against those creature-based matchups with Olivia Voldaren and Grim Lavamancer. They kind of do the same thing. Grim Lavamancer is a little bit cheaper, requires less mana, but instead requires cards in graveyard, and Olivia Voldaren a little bit more expensive, but you can just put mana in to activate. So this is the deck, Jund Midrange, and I'll be playing it through for a couple matches. Hopefully you enjoy. You get to see some of the contrast between this and Abzan. So again, I'll have this deck list in the show notes or the description below, but I did play a couple matches in this video series playing this older version with Huntmaster of the Fells and some of these Tron hate cards in the sideboard. So stay tuned for the matches, Stratters, and again, hope you enjoy. Hello, Stratters. Nick here, playing Jund in Modern. And this hand is, I think, fine on the draw. So we have 2 1-mana discard spells and 2 Dark Confidants. So even if we don't hit our lands quite on time, we should still be alright. So here, I can either play this hand a little bit slower, just play Raging Ravine, but I do want to make sure that I get a discard spell in before I play my Dark Confidant. So I'm just going to fetch a Swamp and Inquisition the opponent. Okay, so Leonin Arbiter, Tidehollow Sculler, Wasteland Strangler. I think out of these, the most annoying is probably Tidehollow Sculler, but if my opponent had a Ghost Quarter in hand, I probably would take the Arbiter. So we're against this black-white deck, probably also has Eldrazi in it. So now Thoughtseize the opponent. And we hit that Wasteland Strangler. They did pick up a Ghost Quarter. So they are going to be able to get us off of some mana. And we can't search because of the Arbiter. If we can draw... Okay, any land is good. Untapped land would have been obviously a little bit better, but can still next turn get the Dark Confidant down and start gaining some card advantage. So, with two creatures on board, I think I'd rather get the Tarmogoyf down first now, just to kind of stem the beatdowns. And okay, so they're okay. So we aren't going to be able to search again because of the Arbiter. And at this point, we might just put the Dark Confidant down to trade with the Lilianna and Arbiter. Although, since we have two Liliannas, I want to run out a Lilianna and make them sacrifice a creature. Yeah, so Arbiter's down, they have the Displacer still in play. And curious to see whether they go for me or the Lilianna. So I am at 8, which is low enough that they might consider going for me. But they do go for the Lilianna. Now if they don't play another creature, I'll almost certainly Lilianna and Edict them. They do play another creature. Let's see, so this Fatal Push won't be on. If I play a creature, they're just going to Displacer to tap it, so I have to just run out this Lilianna and make them sacrifice a creature again. Okay, so they get rid of Flicker Wisp and keep Displacer. Not sure which one's necessarily better for the opponent. I might be inclined to keep Flicker Wisp because it's a flyer. Okay, so I'm going to play the Tireless Tracker. And Overgrown Tomb tapped. So they're going to almost certainly... ooh, they didn't. Well, they should have. They probably F6'd a little bit fast, but they should have caves. Used the colorless from the caves to blink my Tireless Tracker. They can still do it this turn, but the thing is, it just kind of has a cascading effect where, you know, if I play another guy, they can't, you know, blink my Tireless Tracker and my guy this turn. It's nice that we have a clue because we're able to crack the clue. And then Fatal Push with Revolt. The Eldrazi Displacer now. Yep, so they'll just blink my Tireless Tracker. Okay, so now Feeling pretty good. We are at a somewhat low life total, so deploying these Dark Confidants is potentially going to cause us problems. So Tidehull Sculler almost certainly going to take the Maelstrom Pulse. Inquisition's dead at this point, and the Dark Confidants are, we have redundancy. Ooh, that's a nice draw. So I'm going to fire this off probably in their draw step to get rid of the Tidehollow Sculler and their card in hand. I could also shock the Tidehollow Sculler and shatter one of the Aether Vials. If I want to do that, I think now's the time to do that. Well, really it should have been before combat so I could get in for my damage. The problem with, so on upkeep, their vials are going to go up to 3 and 2 respectively, which makes most of their creature draws live at that point. They can just put them in through the vial on their draw step. Additionally, if it's something like a Flicker Wisp and I go to destroy their Tidehollow Sculler and make them discard and they put in a Flicker Wisp, then that's all sorts of problems. So destroy target artifact. I'll blow up that file that's a little bit higher and kill the Tidehollow Sculler. So I should have done this pre-combat. My opponent should be at 17, but this was definitely the right line to take. So even though we took it a little bit later than we should have, it's better than the alternative possibility. So the opponent plays Thalia. And I think we should just So I'm going to play one of my Dark Confidants, and then I'm going to leave up the cracking of the clue to make the Tireless Tracker larger. Okay, so it plays a Thought-Knot here. Thought-Knot's definitely going to take Maelstrom Pulse. And crack the clue. Ooh, a Scavenging Ooze. That's really nice. Yeah, so at that point I just play a Scavenging Ooze, start eating creatures. I have, Tireless Tracker with clues going, Dark Confidant going with the Scavenging Ooze, so I'm not really going to lose a ton of life. So I think I want one Ancient Grudge, just because we saw the Aether Vials as well as the Tidehollow Scullers, so that's a few different targets. Granted, they could, shave some number of each of those. I want to get away from discard as much as possible. So probably these Kitchen Finks and Collective Brutality is kind of a medium removal spell. Grim Lavamancer, probably prefer over that. And maybe even this other Collective Brutality. So discard's just a really poor top deck. Like, we play discard in our deck, for combo and control decks. Not so much for these mid-range mirrors, and so really you'd just rather have more threats and more removal rather than discard, because this is a good hand. Just because, if you draw a threat off the top of your deck, you just play it and you know it's going to be good. And if you draw removal on the top of your deck, it's going to be good as soon as your opponent draws a threat. And so, versus, if you draw a discard spell and your opponent draws a threat, they play the threat and then it's no longer in hand. Alright, so I'm just going to bolt the Dark Confidant and play an Overgrown Tomb. There's some worlds where I might want to take the 2 damage to leave up Fatal Push, but for example, if they have Arbiter plus Ghost Quarter, I would really wish that I had, but I mean, they'd have to play exactly a 2-drop. So here, I think I just want to terminate and play Overgrown Tomb tapped. Flicker Wisp. Blinking Plane, so signaling a path doesn't necessarily have one. Actually going to play Tarmogoyf here. Since there's 2 creatures in the yard and I have lots and lots of green mana, I think Scavenging Ooze is actually a bit better right now. So lead with the Tarmogoyf. If it gets past, then that triggers Revolt and allows me to Fatal Push the Flicker Wisp. Concealed Courtyard tap, so they could still have Thoughtseize. Let's see if we get past now, and we don't. So I think I just want to make them discard and kill this Flicker Wisp. Okay, so they ditch a Wasteland Strangler. So this is really filling the yard up with creatures, so this Scavenging Ooze, if we can get it, is going to be pretty good. Thoughtseize. Since we have a lot of removal, they might not take a removal spell, they might take, Huntmaster or Scavenging Ooze. I don't know, I might take Scavenging Ooze in their position, unless they have several removal spells in their hand still, just because I have a lot of removal here. Well, that's a nice draw. So I think I'm going to fetch, play Scavenging Ooze, Fatal Push the Thoughtseize. So I'm going to get a Blood Crypt, perhaps? Maybe a Stomping Ground. I want a red source so I can activate the Ravine, and then I think I just want to max my green mana. So Stomping Ground makes sense there. This enables us to Fatal Push the Thoughtseize. I just want to leave this Maelstrom Pulse in hand in case they have a Reality Smasher, since Fatal Push can never target a Reality Smasher. And Concession, so yeah, I think we were just lined up really well that game. It's hard to say because we don't know exactly what they had in hand, but a nice threat in the Scavenging Ooze that we have left, and Huntmaster of the Fells as well. Maelstrom Pulse, Terminate. I mean, regardless of whatever they had in hand, unless they had something like a Lingering Souls, which even then, Maelstrom Pulse answers, or, Reality Smasher, we have to take the 5, but we get to Maelstrom Pulse or Terminate it. Really, they need some sort of, card advantage card in order to really compete with this hand. And I'm not exactly sure what that deck would play. And, if we draw a Dark Confidant, that makes things go even better for us. So this is Jund, a very classic modern deck that I've updated a little bit, with the newer sets of late. And I'll be playing a couple more matches with it, so stay tuned, Stratters.